My name is Caleb.
Nolan.
Sus.
Wade.
Baka.
Okay, so I don't know about you, but when I see my car across a dark parking lot, I strategically place each one of my keys in between my fingers in case something were to happen. It isn't guaranteed that a creepy guy is going to follow me, but it's a thought that motivates my action. In the world we live in, it's socially acceptable for fear to dictate actions. Now, our generation loves to test limits and ourselves with obvious thrills. However, we only like to interact with fears in controlled environments. During Chapman University's fourth wave of their national survey entitled America's Top Fears, we see major horror movie companies take fears ranking towards the top of the chart results, like clowns and murder, and incorporate them into movies we can't wait to see. In this way, we're in control over what we see and what we're exposed to. If it gets too much for us or we feel uncomfortable, we can leave the situation. Our society basically wants us to be scared, but just at the level we feel comfortable at. According to the studies conducted this year by the National Retail Federation, our country has a growing allowance of around $9 billion to spend on Halloween for costumes, decorations, sweet treats, and of course haunted houses. It's a time to dress up as something creepy, stock up on candy, and get scared out of your pants. This happens to be where all the fun happens for most people. In the back of our heads, though, we know it's all fake. So why do we do it? When I was a little girl, I was told the crazy stories of La Chupacabra and La Llorona, constantly by my older cousins, so naturally I'm afraid of the dark and rivers, especially rivers in the dark. Despite being a scaredy cat every year you can catch me paying too much money for haunted house tickets and watching marathons of horror movies. At first, the thought of going into a haunted house terrifies me, but at the end, the thrill is worth it. I know most of you don't think it can be good for you to be scared, but within these 3 points, you'll see fear actually does more good for you than you think. The first one is what your body does when it's afraid. Second is psychological effects and the addiction to adrenaline. And third is how fear strengthens your survival skills. First, let's talk about exactly how your body processes fear. Despite what most people think, a scare does more to your body than release a small amount of adrenaline. Well, this is the primary reaction. Your body is so complex, the reaction incorporates multiple bodily systems. It first starts off with the brain, and then travels down into systems including the endocrine, vascular, and immune. Each of these come together to benefit your overall physical health. According to researcher Lucy Todd from the Killer Infographic Agency, your skin produces extra moisture that is collected on its surface to heighten the electrical conductivity, which allows us to become more sensitive to touch and outside temperature. In turn, we're able to regulate an adequate internal body temperature. Similarly, our blood pressure rises and vessels expand to assist in blood flow to the rest of the body. In 2009, professors from Coventry University in the UK studied blood samples of individuals in their 20s who watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The results showed a high level of the disease and infection defensive white blood cells grow in numbers and circulate the bloodstream. This meant the frightening experiences raises the immune system's ability to fight infection. Horror films corresponding to a 2012 study performed again in the UK, but from the University of Westminster, show they actually helped viewers lose weight. Movies that scored the highest were The Shining, Jaws, and The Exorcist. Individuals who watched them burned 184 calories, 161 calories, and 158 calories, respectively. The reason for this was explained by specialist Dr. Richard McKenzie from the University of Westminster, as fear lowers the appetite, increases the basal metabolic rate, and ultimately burns a higher level of calories. Fear cannot only make you feel better physically, it can also boost your mental health as well. We see them on TV, on their social media platforms, and maybe even in person. Daredevils pretty much go everywhere and do anything to get that surge of being afraid. What makes that feeling so addictive? Author of the books entitled Scream, Chilling Adventures in the Science of Fear, sociologist Margaret Kerr gives the explanation to why the feeling is so important to people by saying, the high arousal, negative stimuli improves mood significantly. On a similar note, Kerr goes on to describe after the effects of being terrified comes with a feel-good sensation of accomplishment, and after a scary experience, people feel less anxious, less frustrated, and happier as a whole. Psychiatrist Dr. Shahram Heshmat labels the chemicals and hormones released in the brain as a feel-good drug due to the fact that they act like internal morphine by blocking and slowing down pain receptors in the brain. While the initial feeling of fear can have people crawling back for more, possibly the most vital role fear plays in our society is the fact that it can save our lives. When you look at the big picture, one could say humans have never lived in a time where someone wasn't afraid of something. Because if we weren't, we wouldn't be alive today. From the earliest time, what's made us afraid has molded us in the way we see the world, but more importantly, how we react to it. Evolutionary traits have been embedded into our nervous system that causes us to become more fully aware of our surroundings and determine our safety by the level of fear we are experiencing, says neuroscientist Dean Maud. Similarly, in combat, the fight or flight response is what police officer Darren Lahr considers the greatest natural instinct, as it is responsible for survival. In his research of over 85 police officers in knife combat, more than 80% of them produced the flight response, which eventually saved their life. To be afraid does not mean that one has a weak character. Instead, it shows they are well equipped for the challenges of life. As my time here comes to a close, remember, the feeling of being afraid incorporates many different systems within your body that react to benefit you. The goal of hormones released in your brain is to bring you a good feeling that can sometimes be addictive. Fear is critical to survival, and without it, the human race probably would not have survived. With all these points in mind, I hope you remember that sometimes it's good to be afraid. So I challenge you not to conform to how society wants you to feel, and instead try to embrace what makes you feel afraid. So grab some popcorn and a buddy if you have to, and put on a scary movie. After all, it's good for you.